All right. So this week will be about detection and analysis and being able to set up your alerts and your dashboards and everything else. Again, we've talked at these at a high level, but now how we're actually going to work through the flow as it goes through. So our goal is to understand the environment, identify our security objectives, gather requirements, set up our threat modeling, use our case definitions, all the way through till we get over to the document training. This is what you guys are going to do in your quote unquote big project, right? So you guys will figure out your environment. You're going to identify where your security stuff is, gather all the requirements that would be for that network, and then start setting up your SIEM and everything else inside of there. So with security monitoring and analysis, again, this is just aimed to protect our services. We're going to have continuous surveillance, our data sources that are coming through. So you guys will need to identify where everything's coming, whether it's network traffic, system logs, application logs, et cetera. We'll be looking for real-time detection as well as event correlation. Remember that that's where we bring everything into that SIEM so that we can correlate logs between other systems. And then we'll try to generate alerts in our dashboards and attack. So as we get through our data collection, you guys are going to bring in logs from all these different sources. That will allow us to set up event detection, which is looking for any kind of anomalies. You guys will set up baselines and then alert generation based off of that. And then once you guys find alerts that come in there, then you'll have to do an investigation and analysis page, go through the response and remediation, and then continuous improvement to make it better. Again, that'll this last part will be when we start attacking you. All right. Let's see here. Malware detection. It's just talking about the process that you would move through there. Essentially, you're going to get some kind of monitoring of authentication logs. The analysis is going to say that it's seen unusual user behavior, maybe login times with historical data. In other words, Gage doesn't log in after 8 o'clock. Randomly, he's trying to log in a lot at midnight one night for some reason. That would raise a flag, in which case it appears suspicious and the account may need to be temporarily suspended while the investigation is initiated, and then prevent based off heuristics that are coming through there. Okay. Phishing attack, same way. We'll send out random phishing attacks and then you could get those compromised. So correlation rules, this is what's going to play a critical role in the incident detection and analysis of that security environment. It's the rules that help identify complex security incidents by correlating multiple events, or IOCs. Anybody remember what IOCs are? That is the one acronym you should really know coming out as an undergrad cybersecurity major. Something of something.
Indicators of compromise.
Way to go, ChatGPT.
No, that was just Google. Right? Straight up, I just went to CrowdStrike.com.
Yep. IOCs are indicators of compromise. All right. When you talk with employers, stuff like that, they're going to talk in terms of IOCs. So indicators of compromise, or if you look at security bulletins that come across, any kind of vulnerabilities, that kind of stuff, they always talk about the IOCs. What is the indicator that you've been compromised? All right. On an overview of those correlation rules, you have to set up its purpose, the components, which is the conditions. This may include logic operators like and, or not. And then you would set some threshold for a minimum or maximum of those certain type of events defined within a certain time window. So different types of correlation that you could set up is like a simple correlation where it matches specific patterns or sequences of events without considering the context of other events. Complex correlation, where it starts multiple events and the relationships based off a sophisticated attack. So you might start seeing a couple pings on a port, and then you also start seeing a bunch of flood of information over here. They will actually take those two events as one event as opposed to just a singularity event. Right. Temporal correlation will focus on events occurring within a specific time window or sequence. And a statistical correlation will be used as statistic analysis techniques to identify some deviations from a baseline behavior or detect anomalies based off historical data patterns. AKA something like all of a sudden we're pulling 100 mega traffic when we typically only run 10 mega traffic, right? That's a statistic deviation of what? I'm totally kidding. I'm not doing statistic deviations in here, but it would be what, 4 or 5, right? Something like that. If my statistics class reminds me of what statistical deviations were. The good news is the software tells you. So I'm not asking you to take statistics. The software will tell you that that's outside the mark. All right. You guys will have to tune those. It's going to get really chatty, really alerty at first until you determine what is the proper threshold, right? So if your business really is dynamic where you may only have 10 mega traffic and then some days you burst to 20, 30, and you don't necessarily want to throw an alarm, but you do want to throw an alarm if it hits 60, 80 all of a sudden. Or if it hits it in a certain time period, maybe you would not trigger that event like noon because you know we have a big database transfer at noon, or midnight when it's doing a backup. You would exclude those from your actual events. Integration with your incident response. This is used so that you can trigger information and keep one uniform system. And then continuous improvement, just always making it better based off what you guys are seeing as logic. So a scenario here, or an example of a denial of service attack, is an organization network suddenly experiences a significant increase in inbound traffic, leading to degraded network performance and or service interruptions. Security analysts suspect a DDoS attack and need to quickly confirm the incident and initiate response actions. So the action is they have had an anomaly detection that triggers the volume of inbound network traffic exceeds a predefined threshold within a certain amount of time. The logic is an OR, and then you're going to see a threshold of 5x increase in inbound traffic compared to historical baseline within a 15-minute window. Action is to generate an alert for further investigation. You will also see something like a simultaneous increase in server errors, right? The idea behind a DDoS is that it just generates numbness to your web servers, causing them to have to respond, even if it's a 500 error. If it does that thousands and thousands of times per second, you end up compromising the CPU because it's spiked through the roof kind of thing. In this case, it's going to monitor those server logs for a high volume of error responses, such as HTTP 500 errors or database connection errors. That will be an AND logic as opposed to the OR, and it's going to see it as a 3 times increase for server error responses, coinciding with that spike in network traffic we have on the left. It will then generate a high priority alert and escalate for immediate investigation. In other words, this alert just shows us a spike, but if we have a massive amount of error logs going on plus a spike in network traffic, this is a pretty good indication that we have a DDoS attack. Difference between two simple, go back here, going the wrong way. So two simple correlations where we just check each one individually versus a complex where we're putting multiple of those together. In this case, it starts to lean on the statistical one where we're looking at 5 times increase and a 3 times increase over here. Now, why use 5? Why use 3? Based off your data, right? You try X amount. If it doesn't work, you bump up the threshold a little bit. Let's see, a geographical source diversity. So we can analyze the source IP address of those coming in, correlate that spike of network traffic that it's coming from a diverse group of geographic locations. That is what makes it a distributed denial of service attack, right? The idea is that it's not all coming from one IP, it's coming from all over the world or multiple countries. In that case, if we have that plus incoming traffic from at least 10 different countries within a 5-minute window, generate another alert because this is even more indication of a DDoS attack. If we look at our protocols and ports, this is to monitor traffic coming in, and we're looking for unusual protocols, maybe a high spike in UDP 53 for DNS amplification. That will correlate with that spike in network traffic, and we start to see a presence of that traffic on non-standard ports. Then we can go ahead and generate an alert because that also could look like a DDoS attack. We would set up rate limiting and traffic filtering. That will then look for deploying any kind of rate limiting when we see those measures that we had before go ahead and automatically do a response plan of limiting the amount of traffic that could come in on those ports. So one example of this a while back was at an institution close to us where they were sending it all over TCP and port UDP 0, right? There is no 0, but that was the problem, was the system was recognizing that and having to send a response back. Or it was attacking it over the ICMP port 0, which is also another one, right? So it was set to block TCP UDP traffic, but it wasn't set to block ICMP traffic, which most people want to be able to ping stuff, but they were specifically going after a specific error message, and that was causing the issue. It flooded that thing with traffic to the tune of, I think it was close to 100 gig, because it saturated the ISP and the ISP actually went down because it just sat there around the ring and kept hammering the system. While it was supposed to just attack the one institution, it ended up taking down the ISP because of the way it was configured. There again, that's where you start to figure out these DDoS attacks. And then during your continuous response, they realized that they had to go further upstream to the ISP and resolve it higher up. So dashboards for these just get you a visual representation of what you're going to see. The idea is that you get a nice little dashboard that you can watch and monitor stuff coming in, right? The idea is that it will consolidate all of your security events, your alerts, your indicators of compromise from various sources, and allow analysts to detect suspicious activity and anomalies. I don't believe you guys are all going to be parsing through logs and go, it's not Neo in the Matrix falling down. If you're that good, power to you, right? On the other components is like a geospatial visualization, put up a map, a world map, and if you start seeing a big increase from a bunch of different countries, you guys can start to see those as red alerts on the screen kind of thing. Different types of dashboards. You'll have the tailored executive dashboard. That's for the senior management and executives, just providing a high-level summary of security metrics, the risk posture, compliance status, and indicating trends. All right, that's what they log in and see every day. You could have your operational dashboards. That's going to be used by the SOC team and the security analysts for your day-to-day monitoring. Compliance dashboards is to help the organizations track and demonstrate regulatory requirements, industry standards, and internal policies. And then you have your threat intelligence dashboards. Those are to integrate external threat intelligence feeds with internal security data to provide insights of what's going on. Think of this like an RSS feed, right? You're constantly subscribing to these so that when you see zero-day attacks happening, you look to see if that could be an indication on your network. It's not meant to be specifically something coming in on your site, all right? So you guys would, as SOC engineers, primarily work with your operational dashboards. Remember that you have your quote-unquote lawyer on staff. That's the one that's going to be more interested in compliance. And your manager or boss is going to be looking for that executive dashboard. Let's see here. In your reports, you guys will be doing reports in order to help document any security incidents, investigations, and analysis findings. This can help with information sharing. If you guys work with other facilities, it can definitely help all the stakeholders across that. Decision support, the better your reports, the better you can make for decisions, such as senior staff and IT leadership can take action or recommendations based off what you have found. And then also you need to help those documentations for any compliance or regulatory issues, industry standards, et cetera. If you are something that is doing operations technology, for example, critical infrastructure, you have to have all these reports of compliance and regulatory issues. You guys may have seen a lot of that kind of stuff with your PCI compliance, right? If somebody gets a hold of a credit card database, they have to notify you going out. We used to see a lot of companies sweep it under the rug. That they stopped that by just fining the ever-living heck out of them until they couldn't pay them. All right, so key components of your reports, you're going to have an executive summary, including the scope of the incidents, analyze the key metrics, the trends, and the high-level recommendations. You'll have an overview, your analysis and your findings, the detailed stuff, how your key metrics and performance indicators showed up. In other words, what was your mean time to detect? What was your mean time to respond? Your incident solution, what threat intelligence you use, compliance status, et cetera. Recommendations and actions for fixing that, lessons learned from that, and then any kind of appendices, your forensic logs analysis, threat intelligence feeds, that kind of stuff that may be needed for regulatory compliance documentation. You could have an incident response report, your incident security incident report, trend analysis, compliance reports, transparency, continuous improvement, audits, and compliance. Anybody have any questions on the reports? So obviously, when you're in the middle of an attack, document everything that you find all along the way, right? And these systems have integration tools for doing that. Yes, stopping the problem is a good start, but if you don't keep your notes along the way, one, you can't resolve it in the future, and two, you more than likely need that so that you can share with whatever company you're protecting why and how that happened. And you want to sound pretty darn intelligent when you're in those meetings. You don't want to go, well, I don't know, they got in and we stopped it. Well, how did you stop it? I don't know, we stopped it. Probably not the best SOC that will be moving forward. From the people that I've talked to out in industry, this is the part that everybody fails at the most, and it makes sense, right? You got a bunch of techies in there trying to figure out what's going on. All they care about is the issue. They want to put the fire out. But if you don't get good on the reports, that's where the issue is. And a lot of entry-level, level one type techs, it's this reports. Now, they break up the monotony of doing the reports by letting you actually figure out what's going on. Right? So you will do the analysis, but you also have to write up the report. Let's see here. We talked about those. So in your alerting, it's obviously going to play a critical role so that you guys can figure out in real time when things are happening. You'll have your early detection of security incidents, timely response to the threats that you find, any kind of proactive resource or risk management. This could be stuff that's coming in from your threat intelligence, where you proactively go out and say, hey, that's a new threat. Is our system vulnerable to that? Not wait for the alerts to start popping off over here that somebody's already taken advantage of it. And then obviously making sure that you are a part of any kind of compliance or regulatory requirements. Okay. In your alerting, you're going to have your sources that you get the alerts from, the triggers that you define based off your predefined thresholds and criteria, your alert prioritization, what is the relevance and the impact on the security of the organization itself. If you can correlate some of those alerts together, and then how you're going to go about notifying people in that, and then any kind of enrichment in terms of context, metadata, or even pointing directly out to the vulnerability, maybe the CVE that it's being impacted by. All right. In that alerting workflow, it's kind of a continuous deal. So you base off your response, you get to your detection, you get your alert generation, you do your triage, investigating as to what's going on, then your response. Remember, triage is what? I mean, yes, there's this word right here, assessing their vulnerability, but what is that?
What's the worst vulnerability versus the...
You got it. It's basically setting the severity, assessing the severity, and assigning a label. You're not doing incident response. You're not deep diving into the project. It's, are they low risk, medium risk, high risk, right? Again, think of it like an emergency room after a bombing disaster. You know, this person got a little shrapnel in their face, probably a low risk. This one got their leg blown off, probably high risk kind of thing, right? It's a poor example, but at the end of the day, that's realistically what triage is all about. You're just trying to assign those severity levels, tag it, send it on to somebody else. They take care of all the high risk ones. All the low risk ones can be covered by level 1 techs, something like that. You probably want the doctor looking at the leg and not the glass in the side of the face. All right. I hope that's not a bad visual for people, but that's the only way I can keep it straight in my head, right? You want the guys working on the right ones at the right levels. All right. Let's see the benefits of that. I think everybody knows the benefits of alerting. I'm surprised that they actually do that. Okay, triaging alerts. This is basically what we just talked about, is setting the severity level and making sure that we have resources allocated to the correct level as it's going through, along with our risk management going in there. All right. So the process of doing that is getting alerted, set your severity assessment or the likelihood of a successful exploitation, your relevance analysis, and then what impact it had within the organization, including financial resources, reputation, et cetera. All of those actually mean something. Some people think, oh, we get a bad reputation for being hacked. What's that actually mean? Today, less than it used to be. When somebody said, oh, you got hacked, and nowadays most people just assume that you're getting hacked all the time, which isn't a great thing, but that's a real life at this point. All right. What really matters is are you compliant within that? Do you have cyber insurance, that kind of thing that can help cover those type of incidents coming through? What risk you have moving forward, AKA did they leave some stuff where they can come in again and do more damage? And then what kind of response you're going to have in there as well. All right, we talked about false positive fatigue and how you guys are going to deal with that so you don't get burned out. False positives occur when the security monitoring tools generates an alert for an event that is not an actual security threat. This will be effectively essential to prevent alert fatigue, optimize those resources, and maintain credibility and efficiency within the NOC or the SOC. Sorry. So you're going to monitor, alert triage, and find the root cause. To mitigate those, you guys are going to have to fine tune your individual criteria that you guys were setting. All right. Set some normalization up in there, adjust those thresholds, suppress or dedupe any kind of multiple alerts. Again, your dashboards that are intelligent enough will do this. So instead of flooding your screen with the same alert 30 times, just give me one, maybe with a drop down kind of thing, right? The worst thing you can do is set these to like an audio type sound because it will drive you nuts, right? Validation and confirmation, and then some kind of feedback loop to say whether or not that feedback is effective in detection inside of there. So set up your documentation reporting, your training and awareness of going through and continuous improvement. How you go about escalating those. So if you find something that has a major security incident that needs to go to a higher level of authority, you will want to make sure you get your timely response, get it sent up to the next level, allocate those resources, the people with specialized skills or tools in order to respond to those. Risk management and your compliance reporting, everything, if you haven't noticed already, they keep repeating those words over and over to drill home the importance of that. Okay. Let's see. Benefits of incident escalation is to make sure you have an effective response. In other words, you want to keep your low-level techs, your level ones out there identifying threats. Let the level twos go ahead and resolve that issue. You usually don't want somebody going from A to Z all the way through because you're probably missing new incidents coming in if you're tied up with all the ones trying to resolve. All right. Not to mention you have different vast skill sets, right? Put the senior person on the one that needs to go in and do all the forensic analysis. All right. Communication paths within there, especially during incident response. This is where you need to set up your framework. So who's going to get notified first, especially when it's after hours, et cetera. What is the chain of command in order to get that information out? There again, if you guys have ever watched, what was the show?
Mr. Robot.
Yeah, Mr. Robot. You guys saw during the one security alert, right? They got in there, they noticed that there were some alerts, they started notifying the company that they were supporting, they set up a board meeting, all of that kind of stuff is what they're talking about here. It's kind of a real life version of doing that. Common communication paths go by email, instant messaging, phone calls, meetings or briefings. On the X side, you're going to be working with your vendors. You may need to work with law enforcement. That's probably the biggest one. Any kind of regulatory authorities, et cetera. And the nice ones are any information sharing organizations. There's a lot of people don't want to admit that they got broke into or they saw IOCs or something come in there. But if you share this among other SOCs, you're more likely to get better information out there. At the end of the day, it's really hard to do 0-day attacks because there is no baseline or heuristics for that, right? These guys are writing brand new code on the fly and then you're getting attacked. The moment somebody can say, here is an IOC for that, indicator of compromise that you've been hit this way, now people know how to resolve that. So sharing that information is huge. It's like Midwest Energy works with the FBI because they are critical infrastructure. They are constantly monitoring the flow of different things that go through there. That information sharing, although it may be in most parts one way, at least you're sharing that information somewhere. Documentation and reporting, set up, again, whatever you're going to do in your post-incident analysis. Ticketing systems, all right? This is going to be important so that you guys can facilitate tracking, managing, and resolution of those security incidents. This is usually that centralized platform that gives you all the logging, prioritizing, assigning, and a ticketing system going in there. Some pretty common ticketing systems in this. ServiceNow is probably one of the biggest ones I've seen. The Jira Service Management, I believe that one's free. Look that one up for me, but I'm pretty sure that was an open source one if I recall. Remedy Force, Freshservice, Zendesk is a very popular one for ticketing. Companies I've worked at have used Zendesk. It's not cheap, but it does work well. PagerDuty and SysAid. Was Jira a free one or is that a paid one?
I'm looking, but I doubt it.
I could be confusing that with something else, but
my knowledge is when we used it working for the government, it was paid.
okay, that answers that. Thank you, sir. I know that one, the ServiceNow is a pretty popular one. I know that one's paid, but Jira, there was something about the word Jira that was making me think that they had some free ones out there. Too many acronyms in the head. All right.
They do have a free one for up to 3 agents.
Okay. And I think that's the one we looked at for potentially doing like in here, for example, in our, when you guys build out your network, I think that was the one that came across. That's why I had that in my head. But you guys may want to look at some of these other ones to figure out which one would fit for our class, so to speak, when you guys get that big. So the key things to take out of this week is knowing how you guys are going to set up your dashboards, how you're going to set up correlations of those rules that go through there, setting up your triage of what's going to go in, aka who's going to assign what. And then when you get to your escalation, how you guys all going to communicate in this case, you guys are going to have on-campus students as well as virtual students. So you guys will need to be able to find a way to communicate, or likely Discord or whatever else you guys want for live messaging. All right. So recap this one, the SIME and the use case development on how you set up your threat and log analysis and correlation, setting up correlation rules, alerting based off that, setting up or reducing false positives by implementing effective escalation. And then your security teams are going to rely on communication. So having proper email, chat platforms, ticketing system, phone calls, et cetera, in order to collaborate together. That is probably going to be the hardest part of our big project is all the on-campus students with the virtual students. But guess what? That's real in a SOC. Most SOCs I know today, they are not in one building. It's a bunch of people all working from home, all working at the same quote unquote SOC. So it's about as realistic as this class gets. Any questions on incident detection and analysis? So there is a lab this week, as I mentioned in the announcement, not that announcement. Did I move the announcement? I did. Here. Close the grades. Okay. All those grades have been transferred. Midterms are going to be due on Monday of next week. So that's the reason I transferred all these grades is a lot of people were sending me emails. Hey, where am I at in the class? A couple of you did the wrong lab, like you did lab 6 instead of lab 5 last week. I don't know. There was a small handful of people that did that. Double check. If you guys redo your scores on 5 and 6, those I will transfer in before Monday. Couple of notes, students have not completed any work. Make sure you double check that. Big difference between being late on an assignment and not doing anything, right? The whole goal, if you remember back in the beginning, email me if you're going to be late on an assignment so I know something's up. But if you don't email me and such, you may end up with zeros. I need to have lab 6 and all other labs done at Sunday at midnight this week. All right. That way I can get your grades in for midterm. I won't accept anything past that except for lab 7. So after Monday, those first 6 labs are done. in the books. Same way with the quizzes, all of those should be done and in the books. I won't go back and update or change any of those. You'll have lab 7 that comes out, quiz 7, and then I believe there's a quiz 8, and then we're done. Okay. Anybody have any questions on grades? Concerned about their grade? So if we look at our syllabus, note that we're still on track pretty much with this syllabus. So we are at this point here of incident detection and analysis, right? We will have module 7 and module 8. And then starting by week 11 down here, we will be working on the game environment. We can ignore this CISA lab stuff. I don't intend to do that. That was the backup plan if for some reason we can't get this environment up and running, right? If we have issues with this environment, that's the backup plan. You guys will end up going through some other lab sets in order to get more practice doing the same thing, right? But I would really like to have this hands-on lab environment where everybody's working together to build a SOC. That's the primary focus. When we get down to week 15 and 16, that's where you guys will take your practice exam, your exam prep, the CTF, et cetera. There is a final exam for this course, which is the proctored exam, but there's also a final exam of everything you guys covered. All right. I don't know if I'm going to end up using that yet. I may just open it, but not take it for a grade so that you guys can use that as a way to practice for the prep. So I'll find out whether or not they ended up giving me a full practice exam this year. Some courses have it, some courses don't. If they did end up sending that to me, which I don't think I've got it yet, so they may not have it, then you guys will just take the final as a practice exam. Note that I believe in the syllabus, I have this laid out, that would be your mock cert exam, and so that would be your 20% here. Okay. So if they gave me a practice exam, which is basically a mock cert exam, you guys will do that 20%. If they don't have that, you guys will take the final exam that's in this course as your mock exam. You still have to schedule your final cert exam to get your other 20%. %30 of this is that game. So in other words, we're coming up on midterm. You've only completed 30% of this course in terms of points. So it's going to be pretty huge that you participate in the game, take your mock exam, take your final exam. That's like 70% of your grade. Math is math. I'm only warning because, again, I've seen people that not do stuff so far, and like that is going to hurt your grade pretty drastically. Online, you guys have any questions?
Good to go.
All right. Thursday, usual, we'll come in, we'll take a quiz, work over that, answer any questions you guys have on the labs, and then we'll wrap that up so I can get the grades in for you on midterm. All right, I'll post this video and we'll see you then.